And welcome to the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's real as it gets. So, this is episode 86, The Consequence of Value. I am Bruce Gemmel. I'm here with my co host and wife and fellow researcher and kind of like curious mind, Julie Rauer, and Pingwell, our international correspondent. Here we do a series of ruminations once a week. We do a preview on Wednesday to kind of give you guys a taste of what it is we're going to talk about. And then we do the main kind of build out on Sunday at this time, 2 o'clock a.m. So basically, this is episode 86. Like I said, this is kind of us just kind of working through ideas. It's not like a kind of a scripted program. We kind of have some notes or whatever. But for the most part, it's just kind of like talking about what we think we understand and seeing where it goes. I want to thank everyone, first and foremost. Teas Tea, our sponsor, greatest tea, greatest sponsor. And we have today, on this very hot and humid and muggy day, which was raining and miserable, a very brisk and somewhat chilled mint tea. Definitely the most refreshing of the Teas Tea set, and basically something that I always enjoy, especially when it gets a little bit overwhelming like it is right now. So let's see. Let me get started until I kind of like Julie's kind of preparing her. There she is. And basically, value and consequence, or the consequence of value. What does that mean? Why am I talking about that? Why would be interested? For me, right, and Julie will basically tell us her side. There has to be something that we're in pursuit of. I think that for me, that pursuit is value. What is it? It's a complicated thing. It's something that kind of like we speculated for thousands of years about it. We talk about it constantly, but it's an incredibly kind of like mercurial thing. It's very, very hard to pin down. But it's the kind of thing that wars are fought over, fortunes are won and lost, lives are kind of like ruined and changed and whatever because of this thing. What is the value of something? As I kind of said earlier on Wednesday, because I'm a student of Ortega and Heidegger, I've always put a tremendous amount of value into uh, into the meaning and the origin, right? The the, um, the way in which the word comes about, its etymology. So the etymology of these things is very interesting. In fact, we talk about value comes from the Latin valere, which means valiant or to be strong. So in fact, there's a correlation between that, such as worth, usefulness, predictability, practicality, utility, principles, standing, morality, esteem, and valor, which is interesting because sometimes what happens is these things get split. But why was it that in the Latin these two things were similar? And the other one, right, is consequence, which means basically to follow after, right? Those which are the caretakers or the resultant of that. So, what are the consequences of value? What is it that it comes to us individually? What is it societally? What is it in terms of principle? Where does it come from? Where does it go? And how do we find it for ourselves? And how do we understand it socially? I mean, it wouldn't be a show without a big question. But again, we don't look to tell people what things are. We just kind of like want to get people interested in what we think are things to kind of like put your mind towards. So, as an architect, as a researcher, as a draftsman, to me, what's most valuable is understanding. I follow in what I think is the tradition of the great maestro Leonardo, in that I believe that what I should be doing is trying to understand things. And to me, if I get some sense of understanding, that comes to create a sense of satisfaction. That satisfaction is something I don't know if is selfish. I'm not really sure. Maybe it is. If it is, I'm fine with that. But that satisfaction is the end product of what I find at the end of the end of that desire for value. Why do I want to understand? I think it's fear. I want to understand because I think if I can understand, maybe some of my fear goes away. Now, I know my fear cannot go away because the universe is so difficult to comprehend in its totality. I don't believe it's possible that any one individual is possible of completely understanding that and all that entails within the universe. And as a result, that fear will never ever be dissipated to a point where it actually doesn't become overwhelming. So, given that, maybe that becomes meaningless. Maybe the search for kind of like value seems overwhelming because it's impossible. Don't know. But for me, it's always kind of seemed like as if it's better than kind of like turning one's eyes away and averting the reality of the overwhelming magnitude of that which we kind of set out to study. I think one of the things that kind of troubles me now, and we talked about this in the past several times, is that circumstance. It's like, hi, P.
Hi, Pam.
P's here.
Hi, Pam.
Hi, P.
Hi,
Okay.
Pam.
Yeah.
Oh, that's be right there.
Okay. So then you'll come. I took your pad out.
Oh,
It's
thank
there
you.
so we can go over what's new. What's new in this week in Julie.
Should I get it now?
No, get what you need to get.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll kind of wait for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So
You can talk. I've seen you talk.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
super
No,
good
it's
at
like
it.
nobody wants to listen, but I mean,
I
by all
do.
means. Well, okay. Right. So.
I have to say so.
Yeah, it's true. So it was something I wrote. I think I wrote it the other day. And there was this individual who had kind of become, he was, I guess, somewhat prominent in the art world in Britain. I'd never heard of him. But as a result, it was one of these things where he was talking about the fact that he was a curator and he had a gallery. And he talked about how he had kind of had these expectations of kind of understanding and kind of seeing with which things would kind of come about. And I find it curious and kind of somewhat comical in the fact that like one of the things that happens is the fact that the custodians by their nature, right, are caretakers because they're not the people who generated the work. So they don't understand the essence of what the work is. They may be intelligent enough, clever enough to be able to kind of at least kind of understand the principles and such that they could basically convey those to other people, but they can neither generate genius nor can they kind of like totally comprehend it. So as a result, they are valuable in the fact that they have this ability to kind of maintain it within the institution, but it becomes a kind of a posthumous effort because at this point, those people who generated the work have kind of gone on to do other things or they've passed on or whatever, but they've left this legacy that now has to be maintained till the next group of geniuses come along and basically understand the fact that the impulse of the age is not of the institutions. The impulse of the age is of the impulse of the age itself. And that's also going back to Mr. Spock's part. It's like, that's why it's real. Because you kind of can't trust any series of individuals who kind of don't continue to test themselves. And by their nature, they're defective in the fact that they were incapable of the genius that generated the work that kind of came to kind of set the time. And they're incapable of doing anything than just basically they're doing their best to just understand as best they can. So anyway, so that was kind of something that I thought was important to kind of get out. So that was it. I think Julie brought up a really interesting really interesting idea when she was talking about cuisine on Wednesday, which is something I kind of wanted to go back to today. It was about the idea of process of sauces, and we talked about our sadness in the fact that this great global cuisine that existed in New York City that was for very much a time from the 60s probably up till the present something of tremendous consequence and tremendous value in the fact that so many people were able to kind of see food in a way that they had never seen it before, to understand it as more than just sustenance, but as art. And New York City was certainly, the Upper West Side, a very big part of that, was very much a part of kind of taking these things that were just these kind of traditions and making them into high culture. and then kind of understanding that within a kind of world of a kind of global cuisine. However, I think that the failure of the infrastructure that took place at the end of 2019 and 2020 with the COVID epidemic, I think a lot of ingredients were lost, a lot of processes were lost, a lot of individuals were lost, and I think the culture never really fought to maintain the desire for a kind of like a compelling, consequential cuisine. We have, the celebrities who basically will kind of say like, oh, you can't get in here, you can't get in there. That exclusivity has always been part of these kind of phenomenal kind of cuisines. But I think in terms of them really being a great cultural uh, consequence, I just don't know if that's the case. So in New York City, I would say one of the things that we see is the fact that maybe we kind of take a step back and we understand that there is an actual visceral uh, cuisine, and that takes place in the boroughs, like in the Bronx and in Brooklyn and in Queens. I don't really know much about Staten Island. I'm sure it kind of maybe takes place there, but the local kind of traditions of the immigrant communities are certainly alive and well. And actually, given the diversity and complexity of the people here in New York City, there's certainly places where you can understand that diversity, complexity, and intricacy of process. And I think that's kind of one of the things that we've kind of we've talked about the fact that in this next age, if there is to be an organic age, that organic age is basically an integration of processes, not a collection of parts. And what I mean by that is the fact that if you think of a human body, just like when Whitehead talks about an entity, right? It's a stable circumstance for a period of time, and that has a distinct signature, right? And that comes into being and then basically kind of dissipates. But I think that kind of process-oriented circumstance is a series of systems of processes that are integrated in order to create this singular identity are the things that are important. So in this case, right, what makes it valuable, right, is the fact that these are the things that are going to help us understand that which is the circumstance of our particular time. And I think that's one of the things that we're talking about principles and talking about things to come. That is kind of part of where we are. So with that said,
Yes.
Julie, you're here. Good to
Yes,
see
I
you.
am.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
I have
not
to
a
find
problem.
one of my other pages.
Yeah,
of
you
notes.
have like voluminous notes.
Yeah.
And do you want to bring your
I
drawing
do,
on?
sure.
Yeah, and chocolate.
I'm so dehydrated.
Well, I mean,
so
it's
dehydrated. So
the 21st of July
Ugh.
by record, on average, is the hottest day of the year in New York City. The 21st of July is what I call the kind of like the heart of the teeth of the summer. It is the hottest day. It's always kind of like fairly, no matter, if you get 80 degrees, you're incredibly fortunate, but you can certainly get 100 degrees.
It's a cauldron of humidity.
Yeah, it is
Every
right
muscle
now.
hurts. So this is.
So let me say.
Oh, sure.
So what's new in Julie?
Thank you. Quite a lot, as it turns out. So you may want to zoom in just a little. So this is my drawing. My title is Huckster Bouquet. Yes, it does actually have a lot of science humor in it. And I do think that aside from The Far Side, which was hilarious, there really does need to be more humor in the sciences. And I think there's lots of room for humor in the biological sciences. So my drawing is about something called a pseudo flower. This is a brilliant and astonishing mycological adaptation beyond measure. So what this actually means is these structures are not flowers at all. In fact, they are a fungus that was only discovered in 2020, very, very recently, called Fusarium xerophyllum, and it is native to the African savanna. It may be, I suspect it's in a lot of other places. It just hasn't been found by human eyes or human fingers. It doesn't mean it's not there. And what it does is it takes the place of, steals the identities of a plant called yellow-eyed grass, a beautiful little yellow flower. The fungus sterilizes every single plant it comes across, takes its place morphologically, and forms these blooms that are perfect replicas of the petals, the pistils, and the stamens, not just in form, not just in size, in color, a saturated yellow-orange. But in scent, it chemically mimics the scent, not of flowers in general, but of this specific flower, which is rather an amazing feat. Because in order to fool this flower's pollinators, which it does tremendously well, you can't just make a scent that seems kind of sort of like a flower. Could be buttermilk, could be yellow-eyed grass. It really does need to do that. It also emits ultraviolet light, so which attracts bees, particularly, which are very drawn to sources of ultraviolet light as a pollinator. So it steals all the pollinators, because when the pollinators, the bees, the beetles, the moths, the butterflies, and even the ants come to this plant, instead of finding plant pollen and nectar, they find none of that, but are covered in fungal spores of this fungus, which they then fly away with, creep away with, and crawl away with. So it is widely dispersed. And that is my drawing. And I actually, and the humorous side is I have two art objects from the Met that are trying in vain to impersonate the yellow-eyed grass. So they, as inorganic objects, are playing at being the fungus. One is a teapot that's in the British wing, which is perched upside down here. And the other is a very ancient, beautiful, lacquered Japanese incense burner, which is playing at providing the doppelganger scent.
Interesting.
So yes, I will.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we search for value. We try to understand what that is. We try to answer why we do it. The consequence of that value is something that we certainly can share amongst ourselves socially, but also kind of revel in terms of our own achievements. A lot of times I think there's this desire that there's this need to kind of serve some kind of social or public good. I've never really felt that desire. I don't think that my work has any.
Sorry.
I have no interest in my work in terms of like having
Thank you.
being any kind of some kind of social good. It's something that I find interesting, kind of like this program. I mean, we do this because it helps us collect our ideas, collect our thoughts. It's a process-oriented thing where usually by the time that we talk about this, it clarifies things so that down the road things become clearer. But it's certainly not something I feel as if like I have any obligation to kind of do something for society.
Hardly.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, so the value is something I see individually unto myself. I see it as my discovery of it. And, so therefore I can look for and concern myself with that which is of value to me. The consequence of that is that provides me with satisfaction. Okay. So anyway, what are your thoughts, Pete?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts, Pod. Okay, so things that have a value and a consequence often are explanations, structural understandings, new research, which very often, you know, people could not even anticipate proving something when they didn't even know what they were trying to prove, meaning they actually didn't even realize that some of these things existed, that their forms existed, that they functioned as they do. I mean, in the biological realm, things are being found all the time. I mean, for example, the structure of color, which is a cover story from a couple of weeks ago in Science, in the journal, which we get and read every week. Uh, for those of you unfamiliar, Nature and Science are the two major journals where all of the discoveries across the fields, everything from neuroscience to plant science to mycology to physics to material science,
The real sciences.
to yes.
I mean,
This
every
is
once in
the
a while, I'll
hard
have something
sciences.
on the other sciences, but it's rare.
Usually under the news items.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, that's when they
'Cause that's-
throw in
they'll throw in the thing, the softer
psychology.
sciences, like,
Well,
oh.
here are some things that will whet your palate and whet your appetite for more. I don't have time to go into all of them. I can certainly explain these to all of you if I had 17 hours. But since I don't, I'm going to say these are some of the amazing discoveries in the structure of color, how we see, how color is formed. It seems like a very amorphous thing, but in fact, it is not. There is a microarchitecture of color, a microarchitecture of retinal structures in the eye that are producing color in ways that they had not thought. Um, the the mechanisms are quite different, and they actually really did not know how a lot of color vision night and day were produced.
Interesting.
So in terms of visual receptors, there is a process called a cryo-electron microscopy, which can really capture things at a level unforeseen. So it captured the structures of human cone visual pigments, which is astonishing. So they are imaging this stuff on a level that they never have. So human color vision, turns out, is mediated by cone opsins in a number of active states, which go on all the time. And so now they've cataloged a whole bunch of these active states at which cone opsins operate. There are structural insights into spectral tuning, retinal exchange in the visual pigments in our cones that are in everybody's eyes. Now, here's a very interesting.
And these structures are different for different colors.
Yes.
Interesting.
In fact, I will. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
That reminds me of something I'm going to talk about.
Sure. So there is the blue, the red, and the green cone cells. It turns out, yes, there are many things happening in the blue, far more happening in the green and the red, which they did not know. So these three phases, and there's a lot here, but I'm just skipping over these and giving you an outline of the discoveries so you can investigate it on your own. So green and red cone cells undergo and are capable of undergoing rapid regeneration, which they did not know, and spectral tuning. This is the main thing. Spectral tuning. Think of a classical instrument. Think of a luthier. Think of classical cello and violin workshops. So spectral tuning is almost musical. It's almost an art form that is happening in your cone cells. So there is that. Then there is illuminating the molecular basis of human vision in the daylight. Another area of study that they've made huge strides in, and something called dark state opsins, meaning that the dark state is very different. I will get into rhodopsin another time. And here is something to take away. Cone opsins use distinct chromophore stabilization strategies. And the word is strategies, meaning there are very intentional things going on that are far more strategic and not mechanistic like they thought. That's what we take away from all this new research into the structure of color are active states, actual stabilization strategies, spectral tuning. These are verbs, these are action words, these are active processes.
Okay. It's funny because when I think, I've always thought of color, in terms of the kind of like spectral reality of the understanding. Not right now. And what was interesting was always funny was color always seemed very kind of like homogeneous in terms of its distribution across the spectrum. And what was always funny was when you actually used colored pencils or watercolors, you noticed that the pigments that you had, right, came from different materials. And as a result of being different materials, certain colors were harder to get, certain colors were harder to use.
They were also more expensive than others.
Yes, exactly. Now it's interesting. Like if I take my box of Prismacolor color pencils, they're not all the same. They're not all the same waxiness. They're not all the same brittleness. I mean,
the properties
are very different because the properties are made out of kind of chemicals. They're made out of like materials, and they're stabilized in different ways. And you became very much aware of that. I mean, graphite is a certain color, but the thing is, graphite is something that is not used as a color. It's used maybe sometimes as a tonal thing, at least in my work. But it is fairly uniform. The difference is, it's impossible to get a white that can be made to the precision of a kind of a 6B or even like, oh, God forbid, a 6H kind of pencil. You know what I mean? But
that's now, like a stiletto knife.
Yeah, I know, it's true.
You couldn't really draw
you can't.
that.
You can't. No. But thinking about this reminds me of something I read this week in Whitehead in Science in the Modern World, is the fact that we make this mistake often when we say things like, say, mathematics is the language of the universe. Mathematics is the language of mathematics. And, Whitehead makes a very important point in that mathematics is the language of mathematics. The adaptation of that into the physical world is something that is prone to different errors that are inconceivable within the kind of operations of it as an abstract science. So appreciating it as an abstract science is one thing. But in this case, what I'm seeing is that abstract reality that I thought, which was color in terms of its structure, is not what I believe it to be. So, so that's interesting to me to see that the actual understand the absorption of the light and the way in which that correlates into a physical process is not indeed uniform across the spectrum.
Not at all.
It does not surprise me, but it basically makes that point, which Whitehead says, is that the abstraction in the pure sense, in the mathematical sense, talks to itself within the language of mathematics, not within the language of the physical space that it could possibly represent.
That's an excellent point.
Thank you,
I would say, looking at the charts and the diagrams in these research articles on the structure of color, I will say a few things struck me. One overall was the supreme individuality of these processes, that spectral tuning was almost a rogue process. It was very unpredictable, very adaptive, very plastic, very flexible. And like, again, the cone opsins use distinct chromophore stabilization strategies, meaning they are actively strategizing, adapting, and changing. I have lots to cover, though.
Oh, I know that. I mean, actually, we're halfway through this already.
I know. I
You know.
couldn't find my note. Anyway, may I progress to Richard Strauss?
Oh wait.
Oh,
Actually,
what? What?
Pangol had a question.
Yes. What's your question?
Did you understand what she said?
Not a word.
Okay, so Pangol, say it again.
Oh, yes. Pangol asked, what is the segue here? How does structure of color
Well
connect
done.
to Richard Strauss?
Well done.
That's an excellent
Thank you, Pangol.
question.
That is why, and
Yeah.
actually it came up today in one of our questions. As we said, Pangol is shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize in quite a few categories, actually. But as a result of her integrity,
Mhm.
she is being penguin cotted, and it is quite a scandal, actually.
She actually went nose to nose with Bernays Barbara.
She did.
That's-
And I think what really we need to do is we
Mhm.
need to have people speak out about this because it's wrong. Because there are people like, oh, she's not a human. Oh, she's not even really a penguin. She's a stuffed animal. And I find these situations to be just divisive and
Okay.
kind of like, anyway.
I'm kind of running into time.
Go, Pete.
Okay, so
Support Pangol.
I'm gonna poke you.
Ow.
So just for that, you need to give me a neck rub and a back rub.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
Good,
So
anyway.
thank you. He's so great. So
He is.
the consequence of actions, of deeds, especially in those who are woefully misjudged. And here is somebody who was woefully misjudged by a lot of people. Who is the German classical composer Richard Strauss, who lived from 1864 to 1949 through two of the most horrific and tumultuous world wars, and came up against the Nazis. And so Richard Strauss is a shining example of the consequence of true courage and personal bravery in the face of dire Nazi scourges. He was forced to live in a society where he was 68 when Hitler rose to power. And Strauss, who was not Jewish at all, Strauss was a German. He was an Aryan. He was not Jewish. His daughter-in-law was Jewish. His daughter-in-law's name was Alice, making his grandchildren Jewish. And everything that Richard Strauss did, and most people do not know this, was to protect his daughter-in-law and his grandchildren. And it wasn't that he was in league with the Nazis. He cooperated on cultural and musical things initially to keep his family alive and from being put into concentration camps.
Not unlike Heidegger. I mean, Heidegger was someone who, basically became a party member, I believe. But I mean, his work never reflected the ideology of the kind of extreme nationalism or fascism. And he basically, needed it in order to continue his work in metaphysics. So again,
he wouldn't have been able to work at all. Neither would have Strauss.
Exactly. And I mean, what I appreciate was that even though I wasn't born or Jewish, they both protected me during this time.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Okay, if I may. So Strauss also protected his librettist and very good friend, Stefan Zweig, who was Jewish. He also was determined to preserve and conduct the music of band composers, among who was Gustav Mahler, who was Jewish, and Debussy, who was not Jewish at all, but who was banned by the Nazis based on the content. Right. So in fact, what a lot of people don't know, and it needs to be said, is Strauss wrote letter after letter on behalf of at his own peril. He was threatened all the time. to protect his Jewish, his colleagues, people he worked with, other composers, people he didn't even know, and he drove to a concentration camp to plead for the safety of his daughter-in-law Alice's grandmother, Paula Newman, with two N's. But in the end, she was murdered along with 25 of his other family members in the concentration camps. So this was not a man who stood by and did nothing. Mm-hmm. And people really hated him and maligned him. Now, this is very different from, and I will say it because this is widely known, maybe not by everyone, the soprano, the very German, very, very Aryan, and I'm not Jewish either, but I can say this, she was a Nazi, Elizabeth Schwarzkopf, who cooperated very gladly with the Nazis and was a party member gleefully and spoke for the Nazis, sang for them. That was very different from what Strauss did. If you want to hear Strauss's his torment and his angst and the tragic emotion that and his life, what it turned into, listen to Metamorphosen, his piece, written in 1945, a work for 23 strings of the solo strings, each one a voice. It's not a coincidence that there are 23 strings. 25 of his family members were murdered. So each one is for a family member. The introduction and the ending would make it 25. God damn. So,
I have to say something.
Oh, sure.
We get to the point where we talk about the consequence of value. Now, in this case, the value is the deeper understanding of the nature of sound and vibration and music and the human condition. But in this case, the consequence becomes survival. And we think about these things, but we forget how incredibly subversive these things are. One of the things that's interesting is the fact, the realm of ideas is free to all and it's real, was not intended to be subversive, but it becomes subversive in a place where freedom is encroached upon. And in the case of this, the consequences should really be only about the understanding and the deepening of our understanding of consequence. But unfortunately, a good indictment or a good way to kind of see what this circumstance of the condition of the world is to see what consequences exist other than simply the deepening of our understanding. Now, today, I hear a lot of people say that there's consequences to actions and there's consequences to speech. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, as far as I'm concerned, there are no consequences to speech. If there's a consequence to speech, its only consequence is as it understands and basically approaches a deepening of understanding. Anything else is garbage, it's inconsequential, and it's irrelevant. So to kind of put some kind of imposition like that on is just cruelty and it's diabolical. Mm-hmm. And I have none of it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I do agree. Let me just finish what I want to say about Strauss. I attended a performance at Lincoln Center of the Lincoln Center Festival Orchestra of a piece that is almost never performed anywhere, and that is a shame because it is a brilliant Strauss piece. In fact, a couple of the other pieces in the concert were not great, but I specifically went to hear this 17-minute piece, the heart-wrenching symbolism of Strauss's duet concertino TRV 293 from 1947, which was a very interesting year. So this piece is a dialogue while the orchestra is playing. It's for small not full orchestra, between a solo clarinet and a bassoon. Now, a bassoon is an instrument I absolutely love that very few pieces were written for, of lost faith in humanity, unknown courage, and the aftermath of war. Now, that is my interpretation because it was described in the program notes basically as a whimsical and lighthearted romp in his later years, which was a completely absurd thing. The program notes tend to be very on target generally. They were way off base here. If anybody knew, they obviously didn't, the entire history of Richard Strauss, of which I am quite familiar intimately because he's one of my favorite composers. This is right after the end of World War II, when his family was murdered, his colleagues were murdered. I mean, he was marooned in Switzerland when he composed this. So, I mean, and he was shunned by the world. And I will finish what I'm saying with, I think, the best thing he ever composed that was published after he died, which was the last thing that Strauss ever composed. And they were titled by Ernst Roth, obviously Jewish, a music publisher from, I believe, Prague, 4 Last Songs, which are some of the most incredible pieces for soprano and orchestra. And if you want to hear the most gossamer wrenching, beautiful pieces for a voice, and the best versions are Jesse Norman and Renee Fleming. Both do very, very different interpretations of Richard Strauss's 4 Last Songs.
I haven't heard Jesse Norman on that. I have to.
Oh God, you absolutely must. There are various. There are some. Oh, and Elizabeth Schwarzkopf
really
does 4 Last Songs.
Interesting.
I mean, she had a gorgeous voice. She was just a horrible person, but I mean, her voice is beautiful. I have all 3 on CD.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
We're talking about the consequence of value.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that I think happens today is an attempt to try to dismiss the work of an individual by attacking the character. Now, is Elizabeth Schwarzkopf's work as a singer, as an opera singer, able to be dismissed because of her character? No, it's incredible work. The brilliant work, the brilliant voice, right, her is voice not is something incredible. That can you know, and it goes back to what we talk about criticism. Is that the intent and the information are completely separate entities. So it could be that while this woman is singing with a kind of hatred and an anti-Semitic, just kind of vile, diabolical person. Really, really anti-Semitic. The information that she gives out in terms of the sound and the vibration, in terms of the fact that she's kind of guiding other voices through herself, in terms of telling stories, that's completely separate. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's funny because I think I'm going to go back to this next week. This kind of reminded me of. Actually, could you do me a favor?
Yeah, sure.
Bring me his Science in the Modern World, because I was.
Where?
It should be over here. It's like underneath. Here, got it? Yeah. Thank you, Pete.
Sorry,
I wanted to kind of look at something.
Bottle of water. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So, in that regard, I think we need to understand the fact that too many times the consequence of something is dismissed because allegedly we can kind of dissect, or we can kind of like reveal certain kind of discrepancies or deficiencies in the character. I find this to be ridiculous because, again, the abstract nature of things that kind of give us a deeper insight into the nature of things is important, and that, again, the consequence of that value beyond that deepening of our understanding is irrelevant. And I think this distraction is used again in the kind of onslaught by mediocre individuals against things of value. So that that situation is something that we need to contend with. We need to contend with the fact that there is no more time to waste in terms of apologizing for the inadequacies of people who are not worth your time. So I think that if an opportunity exists for someone to discover something of consequence, we don't apologize for that. There's no need to apologize for that. That is something where an opportunity was laid open and someone else had the ability to see that which someone else could not. And as a result of that, that person deserves respect, that person deserves admiration. But more than important is we benefit from that understanding. So the value, as far as I can see, and as I look back on this, is basically that novelty of perspective, that artifact, that allows for us to get to places and have viewpoints and perspectives that are unique. So anyway, are you back?
Yeah.
Thank you, Pete.
So I like to
You find that
talk about
piece
something a little bit lighter.
lighter than the Nazis?
Yeah, I know it's fun, but
Good luck.
yeah. I'm going to talk about sauces, actually.
Good. I wanted to do this.
I'm going to launch into gastronomy because there's always time for gastronomy. Now, why am I talking about the complexity and the origins and the importance of condiments and sauces? Because structurally, complex and unique and layered sauces are indicative of advanced intellect, and they are certainly indicative of the consequence of cuisines, the consequence of food history, and basically they are the avatars for the cultures that they are generated from. They are really engines of creativity too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but here is my point. The classic sauces that used to be known to people, when you would say a remoulade sauce, a persillade sauce, when you would say a mignonette, a gremolata, I said I was out at a very expensive French place years ago, and this is when I saw the decline happening. And I said, I'm surprised that you're not serving me this pork shank with a persillade sauce or at least a gremolata. And they looked at me and they had no idea what I was talking about. Now, I mean, a persillade sauce is a verdant green sauce with capers and parsley and chervil and olive oil and lemon, and it's just great. And a gremolata is a parsley sauce with lemon zest, and it's marvelous. So, I mean, things like a sauce ravigote.
Wait, wouldn't a gremolata be like your parents' mother?
Yes, that's a great gremolata.
Oh, great gremolata.
Yes.
That's your grandparents' mother.
Yes. Or the famous and one of my favorite French sauces ever, sauce gribiche, which is actually made, the actual body is hard-boiled eggs that are chopped up with cornichons that are minced and capers and vinegar and tarragon, and it's just grand. I mean, there are sauces from a chimichurri to hoisin to a gochujang to nuoc cham, the Vietnamese version of salt and pepper, which is made from dried and preserved anchovies, very similar to a garum, the ancient Roman sauce, which was kind of like the mother of all sauces.
Mm.
And it's very troubling to me that people don't know what a persillade sauce is or a romesco sauce, which is made with red pepper and almonds that are ground up. And I mean, this is about understanding the structure of your food. So
Mhm.
would you like to?
Yeah, I think that's another thing is that we've talked about this before, and I want to go back to this because this kind of comes up now,
Mhm.
is the fact that social media allows the idea of judgment without understanding. And I think this is kind of part of what you're talking about is the fact that there are people who will be able to kind of be in positions where they will consume something and know absolutely nothing about what it should be.
Yeah.
They don't know what it's supposed to do. They don't know how it got there. They don't know
Mhm.
how what. So it's like if you take someone and you ask them about something that they're completely unprepared to understand, they will judge, but
Oh yeah.
the judgment may be completely
Yeah.
irrelevant.
Mhm.
But we live in a society where that's the case. So I think it is one thing that the individuals lose the ability to kind of like create these things as a result of the processes which they're done. It's another thing that there's no one to be able to catch it.
Yeah.
I mean, you catch it.
Yeah. Well,
But the
I
thing
do.
is,
I mean,
and when I talk to you, and there's other people we've talked about who kind of lament the same thing. But for the most part, this is not really something that's talked about. It's kind of a secret among the few people remaining who
yeah.
know what's actually happening.
Right. And then when you ask for these sauces at places that not only should have them on the menu, they are serving food that's supposed to be paired with these sauces and is not, or food that is paired with a cheap, simple thing that they got out of a bottle. I mean, it's not in, I mean, I was at a Chinese place, a very upscale place, and I said, I'd love some exo sauce with that. Now, that is a complex and traditional sauce, which is actually more like a paste. It's made of dried pork, dried scallops, dried shrimp, and sugar and soy sauce and the garlic and the chilies. And it's just great. And it's very, very authentic. And they just looked at me and no one knew what it was. And I find that a very
That's
disturbing thing when they should know what these things are. But it brings everything down to a level that lacks artistry or culinary expertise.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, next week we're kind of talking about tolerance, which it's called Tolerance, Its Essential Nature. And it's very similar to what we're talking about here, because one of the things that I think is a principle that has tremendous value is tolerance. And it's one of those things that right now is very much misunderstood. But since we don't understand the principle itself, we're not realizing how it's being abused and how important it is that it needs to be understood and appreciated and exercised properly.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
Should I briefly talk about the blister beetle
architecture? Yeah.
Okay, I will save these notes, but I just want to want to mention it because this is one of the most astonishing, incredible scenarios in nature, which is blister beetle architecture, and basically is insect architecture. And insects are some of the most amazing architects ever to walk the planet, far better than human architects. So this is about how blister beetles get inside digger bee nests, which is absolutely astonishing. Now, they go through many, many larval states. I'll have to make this pretty fast. The incredibly active larval state is called a triungulin, which sounds like a Star Trek race of an alien world. It sounds like the Vulcans, the Romulans, the triungulins. So this is the second larval state of the blister beetle, which actually does produce a corrosive oil that does cause blistering and irritation of the skin, hence the name. In this larval state, they actually climb onto the stem of a nearby plant and build a structure with their own bodies. This is clusters of scores and scores of larvae build a structure, architecture to mimic a female digger bee, including the thorax and the placement of the legs. And it's quite astonishing. And while they're clinging here, they attract a digger bee male, and the male comes to mate with what he thinks is a female digger bee. But in fact, it is a structure of triungulans, the blister beetle larvae, which then cling to the body of the male, and they hitch a ride on the male, but then they jump ship when the digger bee male finds an actual female bee, because it's the female digger bee who builds all the nests, all of them. And the way they build a nest is gnawing through living spaces in rocks. So this is a bee that can gnaw through living spaces in soft rocks, which is kind of amazing.
Wow.
At which point the triungulans, the beetle larvae, disembark and shapeshift, no kidding, through a series of molts and transform inside this bee's nest in solid rock, feasting on the pollen and the nectar from their hosts, and then eating the bees' eggs and larvae from the inside.
Nice.
And that, my friends, is the wonder of nature.
Yes. I remember
Yes.
when I heard about the fact that
Sorry.
was it the pepsid wasp lays its eggs in the heads of the caterpillar.
It's just great.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
I think that there's certainly a lot that can be said for the kind of savagery of humans. But, when I think of the natural world beyond ourselves, we understand the fact that if there is what I would call a natural morality, that natural morality has the two components as its principles that Darwin basically sets out in The Origin of Species, which is survival and reproduction. And survival is only necessary or important if it basically allows for reproduction. Because since the lifespan of any organism is finite, reproduction is necessary in order for there to be a continuation of the species. Because it's not a delicate balance or one of these Disney terms, it's a fierce struggle. And the fossil record is an evidence of the fact that there are winners and there are losers.
Mhm.
So that's something we have to kind of contend with in our own circumstance. But there is a such thing as a natural morality, and it should understand that those are the two things that matter. If there's a truly Nietzschean understanding of morality, and if he was able to see clearly, he would have appreciated Darwin's ideas. With that said, as I said, next week, tolerance, its essential nature, right? So, closing thoughts.
Well, closing thoughts are when an insect is able to make adaptive architecture with its own body, it's also cooperating with a whole bunch of other insect larvae who are then basically forming structures that are fluid and ongoing, because it's also moving
Interesting.
to, I mean, it's not trying to pose as a dead female digger bee. It's posing as a live
female
available female bee.
bee.
So, I mean, this is rather amazing.
Little sex
And
kitten.
it's the sex kitten of the digger bee world.
All right.
So, yeah, that's really
Okay.
incredible.
So, thank you to a lot of what we had. We're really kind of really appreciative of all those people who are joining up and subscribing and kind of giving us
Yes,
comments
we
and
are.
talking about what we're doing. And it's great to kind of see and talk to some of you guys because, again, these are being cultivated in certain places. We love that. So, the Realm of Ideas is free to all my friends, and it is very real. And it's to the benefit of us all to keep it just this way.
Precisely.
Stay free.